Alright, what's going on everyone? In this video I'm going to show you how to upgrade the Chandra Flames Catalyst Planeswalker deck. As always, do keep in mind this is not intended to be a tier 1 competitive deck. If you want that, consider checking out the latest tournament results. What we'll be doing is upgrading this deck card by card, sticking to this deck's themes and doing it on a budget, as we will not exceed the deck's retail price with our upgrades. So the Chandra Flames Catalyst deck is basically an aggressive, burny red thing, like most mono red decks, but it has two sub-themes. The first is casting non-creature spells. We can see this with things like Spellgorger Weird, Pyroceratops, and Heartfire Immolator. All of these will get bigger as we cast more spells. The first two will get +1/+1 counters, and the Immolator has prowess, so it'll get +1/+1 every time we cast a spell. However, it also has this non-combat damage theme, as you can see with Chandra's Pyreling, Chandra's Incinerator, and Blister Spit Gremlin. The first two care about dealing non-combat damage, and the Gremlin helps trigger them. Now, there is some overlap between these two strategies, like with Burn, for example. So if we cast, like, say, a Shock, it will trigger the Weird because it's a spell, and it will pump the Pyreling because it's dealing non-combat damage. The problem is, there's a lot of cards that don't work so well together, like Sure Strike, for example. It's a spell, so it'll trigger the Weird, but it's not combat damage or it's not non-combat damage, so it won't trigger the Pyreling. And then the Gremlin, on the other hand, will help trigger Pyreling, but it's not a spell, so it won't trigger the Weird. And that's our problem. We have to optimize this deck so that everything works together. So let's start by taking out 3 Chandra's Pyreling for 3 Runaway Steam Cans. Now, first off, I actually really like the Pyreling. If you want to build a mono red aggro deck, I think this is amazing in the Cavalcade deck. This, alongside like Cavalcade of Calamity and Scorch Spitter, is kind of insane actually. So I think the Pyreling is really good. I just don't think it works quite so well in this specific deck. If you want to grab some Scorch Spitters and Cavalcade of Calamity, you could definitely build a Cavalcade deck with the Pyreling. It just, in this deck, it doesn't quite work. The non-combat damage theme, it's just, I don't know, it doesn't quite fit with everything else. So I think it's just worth swapping out for one of the better red creatures in Standard at the moment. Runaway Steam Can is just really good. It's just like the Spellgorger Weird, in that it'll get +1/+1 counters whenever we cast a spell. And this one only cares about red spells, so we can actually get counters with creatures, so that's pretty cool. It can only have 3 counters, but that still makes it a 2-mana 4/4, and we can remove those counters to add mana, and that could be important for churning through spells. You know, if we can remove 3 and then play 3 spells, it'll get right back up to a 4/4 and also pump all of our other stuff. So it's pretty useful. I think it's a better fit in this specific deck than the Pyreling, though I do think the Pyreling is good, just not here. Next, we're going to take out 1 Blister Spit Gremlin for our 4th Runaway Steam Can. The Gremlin just doesn't fit with the other half of the strategy, and honestly, even with the other half of the strategy, it's basically only useful with Pyreling, because if we pay 1, deal 1 damage to reduce the cost of the Incinerator, where does that get us? We're still paying 6 for it. I guess we get 1 extra damage, but paying 1 to reduce the cost by 1 doesn't actually reduce it at all, so there's no reason to have these Gremlins in. So we'll take it out. We'll get our 4th Runaway Steam Can, which is going to be a powerhouse in this deck. I think it's really good, definitely worth having over the Gremlin. Next, we're going to take out 4 Stormcallers for 4 Bone Crusher Giants. So these are very similar, but the key difference is that we can cast a Bone Crusher Giant as a spell. When we play Stomp, it will trigger Spellgorger Weird and stuff because it's a spell. So it'll put counters on that, it'll put counters on Pyroceratops. It'll also be doubled by Double Vision. Double Vision is in the deck. It'll double a spell, so if we cast Stomp, we'll get 4 damage. Plus we can target creatures with the damage, and then when we cast it, we have a 4/3 for 3 that shocks the opponent if they try to target it. So it's just better. The Stormcaller is kind of interesting. I think it's comparable to like Viashino Pyromancer, kind of like a worse Viashino Pyromancer, but yeah, it's pretty cool. I don't think it's that bad. I just think Bone Crusher Giant is much better. Next, we're going to take out 2 Sure Strikes for 2 Rimrock Knights. So the idea here is that we still get to cast our spell to trigger our spell's matter package, but we also get a creature out of it as well. Granted, Sure Strike is a little bit more powerful, but it is a little bit more expensive as well. But I still think being able to get the spell, right? We get the 1 mana, give a creature +2/+0 at instant speed. We still get that, but we also get a creature afterward. And I think that's much more useful than just the one-time Sure Strike. So we still get the trigger off stuff, but we also have a 3 power threat as well. It's it's very vulnerable in combat. It's kind of a throwaway creature. It's going to trade. It's probably going to die, but I would still rather have a creature and a spell as opposed to just a spell. So yeah, I like it a lot. Definitely worth having in this deck in my opinion. Next, I want to take out 2 Carol Keep Disciples for 2 Spellgorger Weirds. I think the Disciples would be great if we focused more heavily on the non-combat damage strategy, but even then, it's not very reliable since we need a Chandra in play. Without Chandra, this does nothing. It's a 4 mana 4/3, and with Chandra, it does 1 damage from time to time. I think it's good. I think it's okay. Do I think it's good? It's just kind of meh. Even in the non-combat damage, it's just kind of like, it's okay. But in this deck, it's even worse. So we're going to take these 2 out. We're going to get Spellgorger Weirds in because that's what this deck is going to be built around. We've got 4 Runaway Steam Kins now. We're going to have 4 of these. We're going to be slinging spells and just building these really big creatures that are just going to soak up all these +1/+1 counters and become giant threats. So yeah, I definitely think this is better in this slot than the Carol Keep Disciples. Next, I want to take out the last copies of Blister Spit Gremlin and Carol Keep Disciples for 2 Light Up the Stage. Now, Light Up the Stage is kind of amazing. So let's just reveal the top 2 cards of our library, and then we can cast them until our next turn. And that's very useful in red, since card draw in red is so weak. I mean, we don't get card draw in red, really. At least not a lot of good card draw. So first off, when we cast it with Spectacle, it's a spell. It's a 1 mana spell, so it'll trigger all of our things, and then it'll give us 2 cards we can cast, possibly lands. We can't hit lands, though you can play the lands. Important note there. It doesn't say cast the spells, it says you can play the spells. So you can play your lands, and you can cast any spells you get, and those spells will then give us more triggers. So this is just a way for us to draw cards in red. And it's really good with Runaway Steam Can, because if we remove all of our counters for Runaway Steam Can to cast this for 1 mana, first off, it's immediately going to get a counter back, and then it could potentially get its other 2 counters back. That's why Runaway Steam Can is so good. It allows you to just power out these spells like this. Being able to take the counters off, get 3 mana, use 1 of it to cast Light Up the Stage, and then hopefully get at least 1 spell, maybe 2, to get those other 2 counters back, and also get 2 spells that'll pump up, Spellgorger Weird and stuff is really nice. So yeah, Runaway Steam Can really good, Light Up the Stage pretty good. They're really good together. Definitely happy to have them in this deck. And next, I want to take out a Mountain for a Crash Through. And you've probably heard it before, but I always say these decks have too many lands. We don't need 25, especially in a mono red deck. So we're going to go down 1 for a 1 mana spell that lets us draw a card. And that's basically the only reason we're playing this, guys. It's a 1 mana, draw a card. So it's a free trigger on like Spellgorger Weird. Let's say we have Spellgorger Weird in play. If we have this 1 mana, we just sling it in the graveyard, draw another card, and it'll get a counter, right? It'll get counter on the Spellgorger Weird. And if we have 2 of those and a Runaway Steam Can, then we're going to get 3 counters for 1 mana, and we're still going to draw a card. So it's going to replace itself. So it seems like a bad card, right? It's like, oh, 1 mana, get trample, draw a card. That's not very good. It's just drawing a card. We're just digging, right? We're just getting a free trigger, casting a free spell, not a free spell, costs 1 mana, throwing a spell in our graveyard. It counts as us casting a spell, and we're going to get another card anyway. And another thing, hey, trample actually relevant because we are going to be building these big creatures. So the trample isn't just a meaningless thing. It actually is useful. And another thing is if we have double vision, for example, then we get to draw 2 cards. And if we get this off Light Up the Stage, let's say we cast Light Up the Stage for 1, we reveal this, we cast this for 1, draw a card. So we're just, we have this way to just dig through our deck in mono red, so that's pretty cool. So definitely worth having. I kind of wish we had 3 more of these. Having 3 more Crash Throughs, not the worst thing actually. Crash Throughs actually pretty good in this deck. I would actually recommend trying to get some more in. You could probably cut some of the other spells, like maybe Unleash Fury or Infuriate, or even like 1 Heartfire Emulator for just more Crash Throughs, very possible. But for now, we'll just put 1 in. And the final change I want to make is I want to take out 1 Infuriate for 1 Shock. This is sort of optional as it's really a matter of preference, but I would just rather have a spell that can kill a creature as opposed to a pump spell. I mean, the pump spell is okay, right? You can play it at instant speed, you can use it on an unblocked creature, deal a bunch of damage by surprise, but I would rather kill off a creature and do the same thing by attacking and also get rid of a creature. So I don't know, I'd rather play Shock over Infuriate. That's my personal opinion. I would rather have 4 Shocks over 3 Shocks. So I would recommend doing this. You'll still have 2 Infuriates, but I personally just like Shock. Pumping's nice, but interaction is more important than pumping in my opinion. And even a little bit more optional, I don't really like Infuriates at all. I mean, Infuriates are okay in the all-out mono red aggro deck, but I would still rather have more removal. So Skewer the Critics, Blitz of the Fire Raptor, any red removal that costs like 2 or less preferably. There isn't a ton of great burn spells on standard right now that don't cost 3 to 4 mana, or they only target creatures like Scorching Dragonfire, which is also fine, but I would rather have something that can target both creatures and players, though Skewer the Critics probably best, but the problem with Skewer the Critics is it's only good if we play it second main phase, and we kind of want to play stuff first main phase. If there are any good burn spells, like even just like a 1 mana deal 2 damage, like another Shock that hits players in Zendikar, that would probably, in my opinion, be better in the Infuriate slot than just Infuriates, but that's optional, right? I personally would still probably go Skewer the Critics. I wish there was a Lightning Strike or something like that in standard right now. I wish there was a 2 mana deal 3 damage spell in standard. There isn't, but in the meantime, if you want, Skewer the Critics for Infuriates, but I don't think it's necessary. It's a very optional thing, but I like more interaction in my decks personally, but either's fine really. And that's it for upgrades. Though as an aside, you could probably upgrade the Chandra in the deck to any of these other Chandras. The Chandra in the deck's a Planeswalker deck Chandra, so not quite as good as the main set Chandras. The 6 mana Chandra is probably more powerful at the same cost. I mean, it is more powerful at the same cost. And some of the other Chandras are probably better just because they're faster. So yeah, any of these Chandras are better, though you do then have to take out the Fire Maul, which are probably better as like Pyroceratops or something, I don't know. But yeah, I don't know, it's Chandra's kind of whatever, and she's fine, you can leave her in, but I don't like to take the Planeswalkers out of the Planeswalker decks, but you can upgrade her to other Chandras, and it's fine. You can also include Castle Embras. A single copy is no risk. It'll never come into play tapped. The only way it comes into play tapped if it's the only land in your hand, and if it's the only land in your hand, then you're probably going to mulligan anyway, and then otherwise you will always have another land, so it'll always come into play untapped. So it's no risk, and it has a free ability, pay 3, tap it, give your creatures +1/+0. It's not like it's mind-blowing, but it's just a free ability that you can have, that you can use, or you can never use it, but it's a free opportunity to pump your creatures potentially for the win that you don't have with the basic mountain. So yeah, you could definitely include 1, maybe 2 or 3, up to you, but there's literally no harm whatsoever in including 1, except for whether or not you just want to pay the price for them, which is totally fair. I also want to say that you could build this deck in a completely different direction just by focusing more heavily on the non-combat damage aspect. But I do think that Pyrolink specifically is really good. I also think the Incinerator is really good. These 2 cards are actually really good cards. Incinerator, I've seen decks playing that in Modern, so yeah, I think you could actually push this more into a non-combat damage matters deck. But regardless of which version you build, what we have now on screen is definitely a lot more powerful than what came out of the box. The deck is a lot more focused, and you should find that the cards actually work with one another a lot more consistently. You're not going to have those games where it's like, hey look, I have a Gremlin and a Spellgorger Weird, and they don't work together. No more of that. Everything should be a lot more cohesive, things should be working a lot better together, and you should be producing a lot more power because of that. So if you like this video and you want to see more like it, I have an entire playlist dedicated to these Planeswalker deck upgrade guides, and you can find a link to it in the description below. You'll also find my Amazon affiliate link, which you can use to support this channel if you wish, but that's totally optional, and be sure to buy Magic products from your local game store. They need it now more than ever, but anything else you buy on Amazon after clicking that link gives me a small kickback, and I appreciate that. But in the meantime, thanks for watching everyone. I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you in the next one.